All right, here's Acts 16:32. Now, why would I be specifically concerned about Acts 16:32? Very easy, right there. Up here in the corner here, there I just see the color. There's P45. And as I began the work on this PhD, P45 is my focus. It's probably going to stay that way, though it's sort of expanding beyond that right now. But anyways, so this is a textual variant wherein P45 is a witness. And if you want, real quick here, you don't even have to change anything over there. I'll just drag it over. I was trying to drag it over. Oh, hold on. Beep. Hold on. I'll just drag this over. There. There is P45. I didn't have time. I got to it right before the program. Sorry about that. That's the relevant page of P45. I was gonna do some. I've gotten some filters where it sort of makes the writing easier to read. I was going to blow it up for you and show you the variant and stuff like that. Just didn't have time. Sorry, but that's P45, and that's the page. Anyways, let's go back to this. One of the reasons I was looking at this one is now this. Whoa, back. Clicked on the wrong thing. Most ministers or scholars, when they're translating the text, well, this is actually a relevant text if you look over it. And they spoke the word of the Lord to him together with all who were in his house. This is one of the household baptism texts. All right, so it's relevant. I am going to get the Presbyterian started. I'm going to get Book started in channel. He's going to be running around lighting his beard on fire. So here's the now let me show you how this might be relevant. There's a theological thing here. And they spoke to him the word of the Lord together with all the ones in the house of him. But notice there is a variant at auto. Here's the variant over here. You go over here. Papyrus 127 says autois, plural, rather than singular. Spoke to them the word of the Lord, rather than to him. And some of the argument is he representational of the household, etc., etc. So the variant actually is relevant at that point. But you'll notice P45 in there, but P127 is. Here is the variant that I was specifically looking at, the word to Kuriu, but you'll notice here's another substitution mark. You go over to the substitution mark in this is the Nessiolin 28th apparatus, and the original hand of Sinaiticus. I'm getting too loud because I'm too excited. The original. We need to sound much more scholarly. Oh, you have a peak limiter on? Okay, good. The original hand of Sinaiticus and B, which is Vaticanus. So the two major uncials, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, both say the word of God rather than the word of the Lord. But then the text, Kuriu, is read by P45, P74, and P127, which are really the only three papyri witnesses in Acts at this point. And one of the things I'm going to be looking at is the coherence of the most primitive text. One of my concerns about CBGM is its interface with history. So be looking at the coherence of the papyri. So P45, P74, P127 all read Kuriu rather than God. Now, this is pretty much all that most ministers who took Greek and studied text criticism, and unfortunately that number is decreasing more and more and more and more sadly in the vast majority of seminary training in the United States today, and I lament that in a major way. This is about all they would see. This is about the extent of the textual data that would be available to them. I mean, and over here is textual data. It is interesting to me that your papyri line up with the Byzantine and 1739, which is a special manuscript, over against Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. This is a relevant textual question. Now, let me show you. This is fun. Let me show you, if I can pull it up here. All right. Okay. Let me show you the CBGM. What? Do I need a drum roll? I think everyone has gotten from me enough of the excitement. Here is the CBGM apparatus online. I can't blow the fonts up, sorry. For Acts 16:32. You'll notice this is 12-14. I won't go through it right now. We'll do it at a later point. But ECM uses a citation method that's really, really interesting. It allows for more exactness. It's not just a verse, but it's the actual word position. What? Yeah, that is better. You zoomed in on. That's good. That does help. Here is your attestation for Acts 16:32, locations 12 through 14, which is where you have the A text, the Ausgangs text, to Koriu, the Lord, and you'll see there's P45, there's P74, there's P127, and you'll notice in comparison to the Nessialand, this is a much fuller citation of manuscripts, and you could click on any one of these and bring up information about them. Here is reading B, which is Tutheu, 0103, so they don't use the Aleph. That's just simply Uncial 01. And 1642 was not cited in the Nessialand. The Nessialand is meant to be a handheld text. You're meant to be able to carry it. So you can't cite everything. That's why the citations are shorter. Koriu, without the article, is the reading of 05. 1891 omits it. And then these others do not contain it. So if you've seen the CCNT module in Accordance and Logos, it looks, it's a similar look to it. But then here is the local, let's see. Okay, here's the local stemma, and you're gonna have to back out of that because I'm showing you two things and the one thing's getting lost. I'll just scroll it up. There you go. Here is your local stemma, and then here is coherence at variant passages, graphically illustrated. And so you have the original, the Ausgangs text leading to the readings B, C, and D. These are editorial decisions, but can be examined, and you can change things within the computer module. And then the coherence explained here. And then you ready for this? This is where you have to have it spread out. This is coherence. Come on, stop doing that to me. I guess I'm going to have to drag it this way, the thing. And here is coherence in attestations. There you go. Let me center that baby up for you. That, my friends, is part of what the computer can do in CBGM. These, don't feel badly. I'm about to give you some real basic fundamental things to start with. I just wanted you to see graphically what what we're talking about, these are not. Let me repeat that again, not. Whenever anybody sees this, they go, oh, that's a chart showing which manuscripts were copied by which. No, and no again. It is not. And I'll explain that in just a moment. But this is what we're talking about, the computers allowing us to do. Here's a general textual flow diagram down below. This is just for one variant. And every variant in the ECM, you can bring this up, and this is what you're going to find. This is what you're going to find. Let me first of all thank Gerd Mink and all the people in Munster. There is a lot of work here, and it's primarily thankless. We should be, we first of all need to be thankful that God has given us peace in the world long enough for us to do things like this. That's a great blessing from God. And you may disagree with some of the conclusions of CBGM, but the reality is it is better to have this information than to not have it. Knowledge is a good thing. And this is amazing stuff. And this is available to anybody. I didn't have to buy access to this and that. I logged on, put that variant in, voila. There it was. Now, 99.9% of your seminary graduates in the world have no idea what any of this means. No, it's not sad. It's because 98% of your seminary professors don't know what this means either. This is new. This is very new. I mean, new. I mean, like this for Acts is what? Less than a year since this has been out. And a lot of the conferences and stuff have only been in this decade. So it's not that, well, we're just not doing our job. It's that CBGM is incredibly complex. It is counterintuitive. And it goes against everything old fogies like me were taught. For example, CBGM, if you function on the basis of CBGM, there is exactly one manuscript family that has been identified and no others. Only Byzantine. No such thing as Alexandrian text. No such thing as Caesarean. No such thing as Western. CBGM says they don't exist. They don't show up in the data. Think for a second. If you have, as I have in my accordance setup, if you have Metzger's commentary on the New Testament, take out all discussion of text types, you don't got nothing left. So this is a revolution. It's an absolute revolution. I mean, when I finish this, there's no question I'm going to have to rewrite the King James only controversy. Have to. No one today can do graduate work in New Testament textual criticism without dealing with it. You may reject it, but you've got to give reasons why you reject it. You've got to, when the computer can go, look at these where everything fits together. You may go, yeah, but I don't think that's relevant because you got to do it. It's the days of just going, well, you know, I've read Bart Ehrman's doctoral thesis, and it was primarily based upon identifying the Proto-Alexandrian text based upon, you know, the 70% agreement and reading stuff. CBGM says, doesn't matter. Does that mean Ehrman's no longer a scholar? No. That's what scholarship should be doing. But you can't do anything in the future without recognizing this and without dealing with it. And pushing back against it. That's what the Tyndale House Greek New Testament is, a pushback. This is a pushback against that. And the reasons for that, we'll get into it at another point. So, with that, okay, I put together a real quick, We only have a few minutes. Well, I can go as long as I want to, but where'd it go? There it is. Put this over here and go. How's that? Okay, let's. This could be real short. This is gonna be real long. Well, what? No, of course not. I'm the audio. Basic principles of CBGM, the Coherence-Based Genealogical Method, which is, there it is, on the screen. Need to start off with a fundamental assumption, and we can just go ahead and leave this on the presentation. They don't need to be looking at me anyway. That also gives me a second to take a sip. One of the things that we need to communicate right off the bat, the CBGM requires the reader to at least conceptually recognize the distinction between a manuscript and a witness. The text that is written upon a manuscript must be seen, at least conceptually, as distinct from the physical artifact that is the manuscript itself. Now, immediately people go, why? And there are issues. I mean, I think that it is appropriate that we revisit and talk about the historicity of the text and the fact the text on a manuscript is written in history and it bears relationship to the scribe and what was going on around the scribe, and all those things are true. But what you need to understand, or you're going to end up really confused by any of the discussion, is that when you saw all those circles or those numbers in the CBGM and those charts, what's being referred to there is the text and not the physical manuscript. And what's important to understand about that, you'll notice the second thing I said down below. It has been well known that certain manuscripts, like 1739 especially, but 1881 as well, though produced much later, were copied from very early, sometimes maybe even 2nd and 3rd century exemplars. What does that mean? You can have a 10th century text, a manuscript that was copied in the 10th century, but its text, because its exemplar was extremely earlier, is much earlier than the 10th century as to its relationship to the original text, or as is normally used in CBGM writing today. When you talk about the initial text, there's a whole bunch of discussion about that these days too, has been for years. But the German phrase is Ausgangstext. Ausgangstext. The text of that 10th century manuscript might be representative of a 3rd century witness. And so what this explains is that when we look at the various charts that are produced by the computers in pre-genealogical, genealogical, well, pre-genealogical doesn't matter, but genealogical coherence examples, you can have a manuscript that we would date to the 3rd century being below, in the sense of deriving its text from, a manuscript from the 5th century, which doesn't make any sense if you're thinking of those charts as just starting the 1st century, going 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and thinking of manuscripts rather than the text. We don't know how many generations of copying there were between the Ausgangstext and, say, P45, and the Ausgangstext and Sinaiticus, and the Ausgangstext and something from the 5th or 6th or 9th century. The theory is that what the computer can recognize are relationships that transcend just simply the historical transmission of text. See, CBGM recognizes that we've lost many, many manuscripts. You're not going to be able to put together what's called a Lachmanian stemma and trace the text all the way back to an archetype, because there have just been so many tens of thousands of manuscripts that have been lost. And so what you have to do is, rather than relating manuscripts in a historical setting, you relate the text that they bear to one another based upon common readings and common differences. And there's difference in how you look at that and how you apply that, so on and so forth. Now, this is the only other screen we have. Principles of parsimony. What's that supposed to mean? Well, look, one of the biggest problems in putting together a computerized analysis of the readings of literally millions of pages of text, of handwritten text, by the way, because that's what we have. We may have only between 5,700 and 5,800 fragmentary manuscripts in the New Testament. When you put that together, it's millions of pages, handwritten text. The only way to start getting a handle on that is to boil it down to something that's simple enough to be able to make sense out of. So here's what CBGM assumes. And like I said, you get this down and you're way ahead of most folks. you're way ahead of most folks, truly, out there today. Number one, a scribe typically sought to produce an accurate copy of his exemplar. Now, you would think, well, duh, but this is important. If you assume that each scribe was just sitting there going, well, this is an interesting book, but I'm gonna, you know, make it better, then you really don't have any reason to be relating manuscripts to one another and making, witnesses. See, even I do it. It's gonna be hard for us old folks to get rid of this. You're gonna be, don't really have any reason for relating texts or witnesses to one another if you don't have a foundational assumption that the scribes were actually trying to produce a meaningful copy of what they were copying. Now, where this immediately gets into problems are texts such as Codex Bezae Cantabrigensis and P45. The scribe of P45 did not like when things were repeated too often. And so there are what are called singular readings in P45. And the whole subject of singular readings, big issue in CBGM, may get to it sometime in the future. I'm just giving you these basic assumptions. The practice of CBGM is a balancing of these four things. And sometimes you got to prioritize one over another. Sometimes they're going to be in conflict with one another. And that's just where we currently are. 5 years from now, I have a feeling this list is going to be tweaked, improved, expanded in some way, shape, or form. We'll see. Number two, when a scribe varies from his exemplar, it is more likely that he has done so because he is referring to an additional source than it is that he has freely chosen to edit or change the text. So this one of the big issues of CBGM is, how do you detect contamination? What's contamination? Well, what happens when a scribe is copying one manuscript, but he has two manuscripts? And he notices there's a difference between the two. And once in a while he takes what's in one, and once in a while he takes what's in another. That creates contamination that makes it almost impossible to figure out what the lineage of the text, the witness, is going backwards toward the Ausgangstext. And so one of the principles of parsimony is, when a scribe varies from his exemplar, when what he writes down isn't what's in front of him, it is more likely that he's done so because he's looking at another manuscript and goes with that reading than it is that he has freely chosen to edit or change the text, or that it arises from the scribe himself. Now, there is a huge discussion of simple scribal error. There is a lot of editorial input. When you were looking at those graphics that I was showing you from online, the thickness of the lines, the color of things, a lot of that is editorial. You have to look at it and make decisions based upon Is this a scribal error? Is this simply misspelling of a word that's handled differently than actual variants and additions and subtractions and all the rest of this type of stuff? And, you know, I think you could make an argument against number 2 in some ways, especially because there's a tension between number 2 and number 3. Number 3, scribes use fewer rather than many sources. You see the tension that exists between 2 and 3. This is important because when you get into using the CBGM modules, you discover that the computer can go, well, there's like 47 possible ancestors to this particular reading. And when you start trying to put together the stemma, it works best when you get the smallest number of ancestors. Let's just put it bluntly at that point. But there's a tension between these two. And again, this is where, you know, this is not a situation where we've just handed everything over to the computers and the computers are telling us what to read. I think a lot of people hear that when they first hear about CBGM. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. The computer is helping us to see patterns. It's not telling us what the decision should be. Not yet, anyways. But finally, number 4, a witness will be closely related to any additional sources. In other words, any of those additional sources that may have been used, the witness that is the result of that copying is going to be closely related to them. It's not going to be like if someone's sitting around copying P75, which is a really wonderfully accurate copy of the Gospels. They're not likely going to be also using Codex Bezae-Cantabrigiensis, which just goes all over the place at the same time. There's going to be a recognizable close relationship between the witness and the additional sources that were used. Now, as you can see, there are issues. And there's going to be balancing going on as we examine things. But you got to have this sort of as your background. And then the next thing that we'll look at when we have time to do so, the next thing we'll look at, you can go ahead and pull that down, will be types of coherence. And I honestly think we'll probably just do like one type at a time, because this isn't, it's just not natural ways of thinking. We don't normally think about how texts are related to one another. We just automatically think of manuscripts, not so much, you know, we don't make that distinction between text and manuscript, but it needs to be made. While I would also say its connection, the connection between text and manuscript needs to be maintained as well in other contexts. That's why I've got a lot of questions about CBGM.